Previously on Podcast Without Pretense.
Fuck you, Eric.
Fuck you, Eric.
Listen, I told you if I keep wearing the same shirt, they're going to notice we record all at once.
It's good to get all those episodes out of the way first thing in the year.
That one was quite profane, that particular episode. It's a good thing we earned our explicit tag because why the hell not? If we've got it, we should use it. I'm Maya Akhtar.
I'm Jonathan Strickland.
And I'm Eric Sandine.
And together, we fight mediocrity. Not good or evil. Yeah, yes, we do.
No, not really.
Guys, we watch movies. We watch bad movies. We watch really bad movies, and we test how long we can watch these movies without a second screen. The idea being that our attention spans have withered away to almost nothing. So we want to challenge ourselves to kind of grow as people by watching some of the worst movies that we can find on Netflix with no distractions whatsoever and just see how far we can get before desperation leads us to open a second screen, a beer, or a window to jump out of. Which brings me to this week's movie, The Doom Generation.
Okay, so I picked this movie, I guess, and I don't know why Jonathan's letting me give a lead-in. That's weird. But, so I guess times is the first thing we should go for, Jonathan?
Yeah, I lasted about 29 minutes in this movie before I gave up and opened up a second screen. I lasted almost... keep in mind, this movie is an hour and 11 minutes long. I lasted almost halfway before I turned it off and thought, I'm not going back to this. But then this evening, before we recorded, I went ahead and watched the rest of that movie, which was a terrible, terrible mistake. Ayaz?
I made it all the way through the entire movie. I watched it on the bus this morning. Thankfully, it was a sparsely populated bus, because there's a bit of nudity in this movie and a bit of sex. Eric?
So I pretty much made it about 0 minutes through, because when I had to do this, I was also working. However, yeah, I'm sorry you had to watch that on the bus, but I'm really amused at the prospect, yet again, of you watching these movies on the bus.
Eric, sorry, go ahead, Ayaz.
I did finish it. I did. Yeah.
Okay, so we were supposed to watch this movie several weeks ago, and scheduling caused some issues with that. But because I was at my caps for my hotspots, I was like, okay, how am I going to watch this movie? Because I always do it on the bus, almost always on the bus. I paid money to rent this movie on Amazon.
Dear Lord.
Even though it's available on Amazon Instant Prime and Netflix. And Amazon lets you download a rental, so I got to hang on to that in SD. But I had to download it on my iPad. So these scenes are on a 9.7-inch screen this morning. I'm just like holding an iPad this size and trying to make sure it does not reflect in the window as Rose McGowen, who is naked, appears several times. Just kind of like, okay, lower this. Hopefully it doesn't reflect too much. And thankfully... it was, like I said, sparsely populated bus. Can anyone explain what the plot of this movie is?
I don't think so.
I was going to leave that to Jonathan, but no. Nope.
I'll tell you what. I'll give it a go. So it's the story of two lovers, one played by Rose McGowan and one played by a guy being Keanu Reeves. And they are Rose McGowan is a super foul-mouthed meth speed addict type, and the Keanu Reeves wannabe is a befuddled, stupid, some say sweet, but I think just dumb character, and they're kind of going on a meaningless road trip and they encounter a drifter who is a little edgy and dangerous in their minds. And Rose McGowan's character immediately does not like him. So, of course, she ends up sleeping with him. And the Keanu Reeves wannabe likes him a lot. So he ends up sleeping with him. And the three of them go on an orgy of violence and sex until at the end we get a castration followed by a murder followed by a rape. I would also like to take this moment to make a request of my co-host, which is, can we please pick movies that don't have rape scenes in them for a while? I'm tired of
for
rape.
a while. What was like the last one?
What was the last one? Let's see. There have been a couple that we've watched recently that had rapes in them. There was the ICP movie, the Death Racers.
Oh,
there was a chick being raped by a robot. That was like two movies ago.
True. Yeah.
Now, granted, I picked that movie, so I share responsibility in this. But I would like it if we could avoid some rape movies for a while. Because I wrote, and Eric, I know you saw this. I wrote on Facebook that this movie made me feel really dirty and unhappy, particularly by the end of it. I mean, I could have stopped in that halfway point and I would have been just fine. But I went ahead and watched the rest of it. This is probably the most unhappy I've been after watching a movie since Rock and Roll Frankenstein. It's not worse than Rock and Roll Frankenstein, but I feel bad after watching this movie.
And that's saying a lot, especially considering that you're leaving Rock and Roll Frankenstein at the top of that.
Nothing has topped Rock and Roll Frankenstein yet.
Because this
was bad.
Go ahead, Hayes.
I usually love bleak, horrible movies where like bad things happen to bad people, and or like there's some kind of comeuppance or whatever, and I felt just depressed at the end of the movie. There was a very bleak ending, and there's all this horrible stuff that's happening to people. They're pretty much there's no likable characters in this movie whatsoever. The closest thing they have is the guy playing Keanu Reeves, but even he's just kind of like such a dipshit that you can't really like him too much. But It was just so like dark, and it's not. Apparently, it's part of a trilogy. I had no idea, and since I didn't have a pen and paper during this movie, I took the liberty, since I was watching this on my iPad, to take screenshots of fun scenes with captions. Now, this is a scene. This is going to be fun. Let's see if you can see this. This is a scene where Rose McGowan and the two guys are like arguing near the car for the first time. And the line, because it's closed captions, he's saying to Rose McGowan, "You're giving me an erection." That's one.
Yeah, that's charming.
Then this is later in the movie, same scene, as you can see on my screen. Well, fuck you, you were there. This is another reason why. This is how the protagonist, I guess, he's kind of the protagonist, Xavier, is trying to explain how these two are part of a murder spree. Because, well, fuck you, you were there.
Yeah, the murders in this movie are purposefully surreal and absurd, which I'm not sure works.
The last thing I have here is this weird newscast that happened, which I thought we would see a lot more of. Only once has it happened. And Christopher Knight, I kid you not, of Brady Bunch fame shows up. And this is one of the hosts who say, "So viewer discretion is advised." So I'm thinking one of these will be the screenshot for this episode, because it just was so crappy. And the other thing that I had like this moment of hope. I saw a guy who used to be on 21 Jump Street. Like, hey, I know that character. At least I know that actor. Who then he's the first murder victim whose head is blown off by a shotgun because he's a shopkeeper who's trigger happy. Actually, let me rewind a little bit. I need to explain this. So, this Xavier guy somehow ends up meeting these two teenagers. I assume they're teenagers at a Quickie Mart, and they don't have the money to pay for their food. So Xavier decides.
How much money was it?
He was in the back of their car after the fight from the beginning. And then they stopped at the quick stop. So he was already there.
That's right.
I thought he was kicked out of the car, and then they met up again.
maybe.
Yeah, they kicked him out of the car, and then he shows up at the Quickie Mart. So they had already met him once. They met him.
Right.
They drove up as he was getting the shit kicked out of him by a gang. A gang, by the way, played by
Skinny
Puppy. Yep.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, it's Ogre. Oh, they just stabbed him. Or actually, apparently he stabbed himself in the leg, which bothered him for all of 5 minutes, by the way. And then they had him in the car. The Rose McGowan gets creeped out by him, kicks him out, even as her boyfriend is mooning over this guy, and kicks him out of the car. They drive on to the Quickie Mart, and then the guy shows up to the rescue at the Quickie Mart because the shop toting. Yeah.
Yeah. The shopkeeper gets upset because the kids don't have the money to pay their $6.66 $6.66 meal of hot dogs and whatever the hell else they had. And so he pulls a gun on them, won't let them leave. Zaber shows up in a struggle, manages to blow off the head of the shopkeeper by, I guess, shooting him in the neck. The head then goes into the ketchup and relish, or whatever the hell it is, and then continues to talk, kind of for no real reason. Apparently continues talking throughout the whole movie, as far as I know.
Yeah.
And that's their spree.
I wish they had brought the head along. Could have been a real fun film if they had had a fourth character involved.
Especially because the head kept talking for a long time, so it would have been a great fourth character. You couldn't
hear anything, but it kept moving its mouth. Did you see who played the wife, the shopkeeper's wife?
No, who was that?
Margaret Cho.
She looks much
obviously
older.
Apparently Jonathan and I both read the IMDb for this movie thoroughly.
Also, Parker Posey was the crazy chick in the large blonde wig with the katana that ends up stabbing a guy through the pelvis.
Yeah, and Perry Farrell was one of the shopkeepers, lead singer for
Jane's Addiction.
Jane's Addiction, sorry, yes.
Song in the movie, and also how they got the rights of that. Maybe it was a favor or something, but yeah, so there's also this continuing series of misunderstandings. People are recognizing Rose McGowan's character, whose name escapes me right now.
Amy?
Yeah, Amy Blue. They keep mistaking Amy Blue for their long-lost lover. And this happens about 3 or 4 times during the movie. And each time after Amy says fuck off, in very creative ways, by the way. She's got really good nicknames for everybody she hates. She eventually just says, go to hell. And they all vow to say, if I can't have her, I'm just going to go find her and kill her. And this happens about 3 times in the movie. And that is what's happening throughout the movie. They go to these bizarre places that are all themed. There's like this one bar that's covered in foil paper. There's like a hotel that's checker patterned. Another one that's pink. Just it's very stylish, I will say, but just freaking depressing. And somebody in the chat room is saying, "Love this movie. I saw it in the theater." Okay, you gotta write more and explain this as we yammer on. Go ahead, Jonathan.
He is quite literally one of the person on IMDb. It says this movie made exactly like $270,000 in theaters. So that's a very small percentage.
It couldn't have been on very many screens either.
Yeah.
I hated this movie. I hated it. I despise it. I appreciate that other people find value in it. I understand that. I understand some really enjoy the style of the film. I did not. I understand some people enjoy the story. I did not. I didn't find the story at all compelling. I certainly didn't find the dialogue compelling. The dialogue was laughably bad for most of this movie, particularly whenever Keanu wanted to say anything. But really, I mean, you look at the lines, and most of the conversations don't have any kind of continuity or flow to them. Like, it's almost like you could cut up the lines in this entire movie, switch them around, rearrange them, and then shoot the movie again that way, and it would make just as little or as much sense, however you want to look at it. That's how I felt. I mean, as I was listening to the beginning of the movie, I was just thinking, like, this is the dumbest dialogue I've ever heard. And you know what movie this actually reminded me of in a way? It was almost like if I had taken, the tone or whatever and the fact that the characters are so shallow and not really interesting to me is it reminded me a lot of Death Proof, the Quentin Tarantino half of Grindhouse, and it's just that it's like two separate versions of this same kind of empty core. In one, you've got characters who have the dumbest dialogue that you can imagine. It's just banal and pointless. In the other, the dialogue's not banal and pointless, but it's far too clever and precious. It's not the way anyone would actually talk. It's the way people in Tarantino movies talk, but not the way people in real life talk. And but the two movies, I mean, they reminded me very much of Death Proof in that way, except that I actually appreciated Death Proof mostly because it was a Tarantino version of a Grindhouse film, and it really felt kind of like a Grindhouse film, complete with a middle section where nothing is happening, which is very typical of a Grindhouse movie.
Eric, did you see any redeeming things about Doom Generation?
No. And I even tried to, because I read through like all of the IMDb trivia. I looked at the shot for shot against the rated R versus the unrated version. Yeah, I got nothing.
I saw. You didn't know what?
There was an unrated version.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that has another 14 minutes of footage.
Jeez.
Oh, that explains why this movie's only 71 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I read one review from Variety that gave it a positive review, and I think I can't remember exactly what the phrasing was, and I don't have it open on my screen, but I remember there was one sentence in that where they ended up like getting super trendy and shortening a word, like saying natch instead of naturally, something like that. And immediately I was like, okay, I understand. This reviewer is a douchebag, and that's why why this review is so positive. It's a douchebag review. Because I was like, I can't believe. Well, I guess I can. It's a Hollywood, publication, but it just seems so ridiculous that an actual print publication would be using ridiculous slang to talk about a film in a supposedly serious way. It also is interesting. What I thought the most interesting thing about this movie was opening credits, where one of the opening credits describes it as a heterosexual movie. And I was like, what the hell is that all about? Why is it calling that?
Did
and it
I
wasn't
miss
until
that?
I looked
Was that in the credit?
That was in the movie.
Yeah. Opening credits. It says
Holy
a heterosexual movie by Greg Araki. It's at the very beginning. It's like it because they had like 3 different production houses that were credited at the very top of the movie, and then after the production houses, you had a heterosexual movie by Greg Araki, and I was like, what the hell is this? And it wasn't until I looked into it that I realized that a lot of the movies he had made up to this point featured storylines about gay characters, and so this was kind of that was sort of a tongue-in-cheek acknowledgement. And I also didn't realize that this was the middle movie of a teen angst trilogy. It does not make me want to see the other 2.
Well, don't worry, because I looked. They're not on Netflix.
Well, I'm not renting another one.
Yeah. The suggestion I have for our next movie, it's one that I've already watched because I watched it when, I gave you guys the choice between the crazy kung fu robot movie or Miami Connection. Let's watch Miami Connection. I've already watched it, and I don't want to spoil anything for you guys. I think it's a nice palate cleanser. I will say there's one scene, where you'll need to make sure you angle that iPad properly. But other than that...
Oh, I've got 3.5 stars for this. So that means it's bad for you guys.
It's an enjoyably bad movie I've already watched it, so I know. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to these movies that we talk about, we haven't mentioned something about Doom Generation. It's shot well. It's got decent lighting. It's got good audio. It's not one of those really low budget movies where we're like, oh, it's just no good. The fact that maybe it might have been better if it was lower budget. Maybe I'd be more forgiving. because like when that movie started, when Doom Generation started, and I hear this like just profanity laced dialogue from Rose McGowan, I'm like, okay, maybe she's really playing a very young teenager because they think all these words are cool. And it doesn't really change throughout the whole movie. And there's a ton of profanity in it. It doesn't seem like it's adding anything, or it's not like it's shocking. So I couldn't quite figure it out. But
no, and there was lots of like. Sorry, thankfully, go ahead.
Thankfully, that we could hear it so well. If only they had shittier mic, it might be more forgiving.
There was so many like made up insults throughout the movie that I cataloged them like for a second because like they were just making up insults from her, and some of them were kind of amusing, but then they just like bordered on ridiculous after a while. Like it was insane.
But but I mean, I actually appreciate that to an extent. It's just that the rest of the movie had me so beat down that as it was going on, I appreciated it less. I thought it was kind of amusing at the beginning, but like I said, by the end of it, I was just like, ugh, just let this be over. Here's the weird thing. Like we said, the R-rated version that's on Netflix. It's a 71-minute runtime. To me, it felt like I was watching both of the Hobbit movies back to back. That's how long it felt to me. And my opinion of the Hobbit movies. I think I may have mentioned it on a previous episode or 5.
I don't think we've had that discussion. Go ahead.
No? Okay, so here's the problem I have with the Hobbit movies. No, we've gone over that so many times. All right, so anyway, we're gonna watch Miami Connection for the next one. I am hoping that I will be able to call in because I will be in a different location for our next episode. But we've got this crazy thing. We actually started making, or I guess I should own up, I started making a Google Doc with potential things to talk about during the episode instead of us just kind of floundering around and saying, so
wait,
what did you do this week?
Let's not go to that yet. I found the script of the movie, and I'm trying to find some of the that we're talking about, because the first one that pops up on page 1 is Peanut saying to Amy, you're about as charming as a pus-encrusted herpes lesion anybody ever told you. And I'm trying to find more of these ridiculous swears before we move on to this list, because this is just... I remember that too when this was happening during the movie. I was trying to grab screen grabs of those words because they were just like so ludicrously overdone that I just wonder if they were like in the writer's room just like screwing around. Maybe they were high, or they're just like, I bet I can make this a swear word, but I can't find anything.
I'm kind of betting there wasn't a writer's room. There was a writer in a room who was bored.
Well, he was also the director, so
yeah,
it was it's Greg Araki, so.
No, then he didn't get to talk to anybody. But yeah, I'm not finding it. But folks, if you're bored, go to theawesomefilm.com, find the Doom Generation, and read this. I think reading this might be better than...
It's probably much better than watching it.
Let's see. Amy recoiling. Yuck, you're all sweaty. Jordan unfazed by her bitchiness. What you looking for? Amy, my skull lighter. I swear if it's gone, I'll slit my wrists. Peanut. Now that would be a great loss to the human race. Who the hell's Peanut? Is he Xavier? Amy holding up her middle finger. Sit and spin. Peanut to Jordan. Okay, I'm not going to say these out loud anymore. Because if my mom's listening, I'm just going to get discouraged.
Yeah, the skull lighter finally shows up toward the end of the movie. Spoiler.
Well, I didn't notice that I did not notice that the skull lighter apparently lights 3 different colors when it's lit 3 different times. I
guess it was...
Jordan,
I don't think it's as consistent as the trivia suggests.
No, really not. Smooth,
or at least it wasn't as noticeable to me.
Anyway.
Okay, let's move on. Please. I hated this movie so much. All right, how about, do you guys have anything on the list that you would actually like to talk about? I threw a whole bunch of stuff in there, but I didn't know if there was anything in particular. The one I'm interested in the most, I guess, is the fact that Disney has announced they're going to do a sequel to The Incredibles. And how do you
That is,
guys? First of all, what's that? I asked.
that's the most interesting story to me.
Yeah. So I assume you've both seen The Incredibles.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Well, with that kind of enthusiasm, this is the lowest key episode we've ever done. With that kind of enthusiasm, did you guys enjoy The Incredibles?
Yeah, it was great. I loved it. Yeah.
I enjoyed the movie up to the point where people were angry about Watchmen. Eventually, they're like, Watchmen ripped this off. And then when they saw Fantastic Four, the same criticisms came out. I was like, no, The Incredibles is an homage to those stories. That's the only thing that bothered me about it, because it was just the criticism by people who just didn't understand what it was. But I quite enjoyed Incredibles.
I would say that The Incredibles is the best Fantastic Four film never made. Right? It's definitely got a lot more of that sort of fun, weird. It's not as, I mean, Fantastic Four definitely would get really kind of wacky and cosmic in those issues as well. So it wasn't as grandiose as a Fantastic Four story tends to be, but it had a fun kind of interplay with the characters. So what do you guys think about them doing a sequel? Personally, I'm of the first. I remember hearing at least that Brad Bird said he wasn't going to do a sequel to The Incredibles. He had no interest in doing that. It does seem like he's going to be the writer for this sequel, so that's good news. But part of me kind of wishes that they wouldn't do a sequel because I want to see more. But if it's not done well, then I'm not going to want to see more, and that would be a shame. But am I alone in that? Are you guys really hoping for a sequel, or what are your opinions?
Has Pixar produced crap yet? Have we seen it happen?
Yes, Cars 2.
I enjoyed Cars. The first one was enjoyable.
Not a big fan of it. There's certain movies. I mean, I appreciate almost everything Pixar has done, but I will say that the weakest of the Pixar films is still better than the strongest movies of a lot of other production companies.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of weird to say it because you've got to judge it on either. If you're judging it by the scale of just Pixar, yes, there are some movies obviously that are going to be better than others. Like Monsters University is cute, but largely forgettable. I think. I mean, it was enjoyable to watch, but I don't have any need to ever see it again necessarily. Monsters Inc. is kind of the same way. Is also very cute, and although Monsters Inc. had the killer final shot of a Pixar movie, it was one of those it was like a hug and a punch to the gut at the same time, which was really cute. But some of them, like Ratatouille, is okay. I appreciate what they were doing. They were going for a more sophisticated story in many ways, which was kind of interesting. But yeah, Cars 2 it felt like it was kind of a cash grab. Also, it was weird. It was a weird tonal shift because Cars very kind of lighthearted movie about a self-obsessed character growing as a kind of person, I guess, as a car. But the second one, you had characters getting killed. You had, they're all nameless characters, but they were getting killed in the Cars universe, which was very weird. Like, this is a movie series that was appealing to very little kids who just loved the characters of Cars. They loved the designs and they loved all the toys. And so you've got this, this fan base of very young people, and then the second movie is done like a spy movie, and that was weird. I don't think there's anything that Pixar has done that's been out and out terrible, and I don't think the second Incredibles movie will necessarily be terrible. I just don't think it was needed. I think the first story was great, and it told you everything you needed to know. Which is that by the end of it, these characters have decided that they're going to bring back this era of superheroes, and now you know that that's what the world's going to be. I don't know that we need to see another movie.
I'm just kind of curious if they're going to bother. Is it? Do we know if it's going to be like a direct sequel that's actually it's about what happens to the family, or can it be about before the family, or they're going to do what they did in Cars 2? Cars 2 had like almost felt like a bunch of TV episodes put together. It didn't feel like a real movie to me. So I just really hope it's not like an anthology, because I don't think that worked for Cars 2. There's a lot of things that didn't work in Cars 2 as far as I'm concerned. But
if it's
incredible. But
if it's called The Incredibles, you would think it'd have to follow the family, since it's Mr. Incredible. But if it's not called The Incredibles, if it's somehow a sequel that's clearly set in the same universe but is called something else, then I guess they're free to do whatever they want. I mean, actually, I would kind of like to see a prequel in a way, because I'd kind of like to see what this world looked like back when all the heroes were in their prime, and the United States government hadn't really clamped down on heroes, and it was back when heroes and villains would duke it out in the city on a fairly regular basis. That could be kind of fun. The problem with prequels, of course, is that you already know where everything's going to end up. So there are no real stakes there, unless, of course, you create some characters that you don't know what their fates are, because they weren't featured in the first film.
Well, you do have the issue of if there was a prequel, all of the characters that die because of cape. So anytime you'd see them on screen, you knew what was going to happen to them at some point. Like if they just cut to this right before that one is caught up by a missile. I can't remember which captains or whatever they were called. There were just so many of these caped heroes that die because of their capes. Actually, that's pretty dark now that I think about it. They do kill a lot of people in that movie.
Incredibles has a lot of deaths in it. I mean, you have all those henchmen that are, there are all these explosions. You figure those characters, it's kind of like the stormtrooper scouts in Return of the Jedi on their speed bikes crashing into trees. You got all those guys who are in those little flying craft that are chasing down the family, and most of them get blown up in some way. So yeah, you figure that a lot of those characters don't make it. So a lot of casualties in that movie.
Cairo Kid in the chat room says they can do one like Godfather 2 prequel/sequel.
So cutting
the attention span of a child might not lend itself to that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can argue that The Incredibles wasn't really for, at least not for little kids. I mean, little kids could certainly sit through it and be entertained, but that felt more like, I mean, Brad Bird is known for doing stuff that appeals to like comic book fans of, teenage age and older. Although certainly he can write stuff that can resonate with younger viewers as well, or readers. But I never felt like it was geared toward kids. Like it wasn't marketed as a kids movie, despite the fact that it's Disney and Pixar, which, some people just assume that means that it has to be for kids, which I think is a mistaken assumption. But I don't know. I mean, I'll definitely go see it. I'm interested to see how it turns out. I'm curious, because now that they've announced that these movies are in development, it makes me wonder about the other Pixar films that were in some form of development before this, because there was one that was going to be about a dinosaur, and I haven't heard anything about that in a while. I don't know if it's still in development or if they've canned it. I know that they did some extensive rewrites at some point like a year ago. And there was also another movie that was in the earliest stages of development a couple years ago that was about Day of the Dead, and it took that as the artistic core of the film. And I was really curious to see how that turned out, and I haven't heard anything about that since the first rumors of it. So I don't know what the status is of that film either. I would hope that at least the Day of the Dead one is still in development, because I would love to see what Pixar comes up with that. I think it could be sort of like Grim Fandango, which was a fantastic game from LucasArts way back in the day, an adventure game. that used Day of the Dead as its inspiration for its art style and was phenomenal. I would love to see Pixar's take on that too.
Oh no, I'm totally down to see that, especially from Pixar, and especially living in New Mexico. I see tons of the Day of the Dead stuff around at all times of year. But yeah, it would be great to see an animated version of that. Grim Fandango, by the way, fantastic. Somebody actually made it usable with like an actual mouse, as opposed to the crappy keyboard controls in the emulator. I'll have to find that and post it somewhere.
Definitely. I would love to revisit that game. I don't think I ever completed it. I loved it, but I can't remember what it was that maybe I hit a point where I was really stuck, or maybe a different game came along and distracted me. But I remember playing it and really being fascinated with the characters, because up until that point, the LucasArts games I was used to were the Monkey Island games, which used a lot of the earlier, like it used one of the Grim Fandango game uses the same game engine as one of the Monkey Island games. And as I was playing
it's very different from the original Scum VM games that
Yes,
were the original Monkey Island games. Yeah.
Yeah, very different from that. But there was, I think it was the fourth Monkey Island game that had the same sort of game engine. But what was weird was that I was expecting it to have a lot of sort of slapstick, broad humor, and there's a little bit of that in Grim Fandango, but it's actually got, I mean, it follows the noir genre pretty well, so it's not as goofy as you would first imagine. Was quite well done. So I mean, anyway, I'll have to look into that and see if there's any news about whether or not Pixar is still pursuing that film, or if they've decided to shelve it. I hope they haven't, but like I said, the only thing I ever saw was, I think I saw an artist concept of just the kind of design for the title page. It wasn't even a character design or anything like that, let alone a plot description.
I think I just read that it's called The Good Dinosaur, and that's going to be coming out in 2015. But they're missing like some key personnel, so it's not dead yet. Well, no.
Okay, so that's the dinosaur one. Yeah, there's the one after the dinosaur one should be the Day of the Dead one.
There a Finding Dory one that's supposed to come out as well. The Finding Nemo.
Yeah,
spin-off.
there was supposed to be a Finding Nemo sequel. Yeah, I mean, it was one of those, like, I went on a cruise where it was a Pixar cruise. It was a Disney cruise line, but it was Western. It was a Western cruise, so it's California coast essentially. And during that cruise, and I met you, Ayaz, for lunch on that cruise. When we stopped in San Francisco. Yeah. So, but anyway, on that cruise, they actually had people from Pixar talking about what they did at the company and some of the movies they had worked on. And they included just mentioning that this was going to be one of the upcoming films, the dinosaur one and the Day of the Dead one. But like I said, that was the last I had heard of either of those, apart from the fact that I knew that the dinosaur one had some issues in production. Which is not the first time it's happened under Lasseter's helm. I mean, Lasseter had some pretty famous issues with some other directors, not necessarily with Pixar, but with Disney Animation. So what about, let's see, I'm looking at, I was looking at the next story down, which is the fact that there's another movie shooting across the street from me. I don't know what it is yet.
No idea.
I think it may be because they shot some.
People need a desolate wasteland, they seem to go to Atlanta.
Well, I live right across from a place called the Pullman Train Yard, which has a couple of old warehouses that have been abandoned for a few years. So they look kind of like this sort of either urban wasteland or post-apocalyptic thing from inside those buildings. Like where I'm at, like I'm literally on the right side of the tracks, I guess. And that's on the wrong side of the tracks. It's across the train tracks from me. But the it's a train yard, it's fenced off, everything like that. And they've been setting up for the last week. They've got a big tent set up, and I think they just set up the talent trailer. And I assume these are pickup shoots for Mockingjay, because that's what they were shooting over there late last year. So I'm guessing that's what it is now, but I don't know for sure. I saw them towing in. They had a vintage yellow cab, which you don't usually see in Atlanta, being brought in, along with a very ugly-looking rust red van, looked like it was distressed, and a kind of a bright red vintage pickup being towed behind it all. So I don't know if this is I don't know if that would be completely unusual for Hunger Games. I don't know anything about Hunger Games other than the basic premise. So if that is not something that you would ever see in Hunger Games, they're shooting something else over there, which could be. It could be that they're shooting scenes from Fast and the Furious, because they're also shooting that in Atlanta. The only other thing I can think of that they could be shooting there is Ant-Man, which is also shooting in Atlanta. So, but it's kind of interesting that it's just happening right across the street. So whenever I get a little curious, I pop up to the roof and take a look. Or sometimes I can actually see what's going on from ground floor, but kind of interesting. It's weird to think that there's a prime shooting location right across the street from me.
We need to keep that out of context at the ready.
Yeah. What I need to do is get my my camera and just get a nice nice lens for long distance shooting. Make some money on the side as a paparazzo.
So we take a look into the future, gentlemen.
Sure, why not?
Next week on Podcast Without Pretense.
Hey guys, I just played Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, and I completed it in 11 minutes.
I can't believe Pixar is going to remake the Doom generation.
I can't believe I'm recording on a boat.